right, welcome. My name is Tanya and we've got 60-minute yin practice together. And we're going to start in a seat, so ideally having your sit bones elevated on a block or a cushion if you can. And we're going to find length in our spine, and I'm just going to take you through a brief little guided visualization or meditation. So as you come into a seat, if it's not comfortable for you to be in a seat, you're most welcome just to lay down flat on your back with whatever support you need. And then just start to connect with your breath. Eyes gently closed. I'm going to take you through a practice which is a practice for spring. As we're just a few days into this beautiful spring weather, where there's this beautiful process of renewal and growth and change and transformation and possibilities. And so the practice we're going to do will focus on the spleen meridian. It's this energetic pathway that runs right down the front of the torso into the front of the hips, into the hip flexors, and then all the way down in through the inner seam of the legs. And the reason why we're doing that is because the spleen is a meridian or an energetic pathway that is associated with the season of spring. So all of our poses will target the front body through heart opening through the front of the tummy and the chest, hip opening, which is always really juicy and beautiful, and then through the inner line of the leg as well. So as your eyes are softly closed and you're taking a moment to just connect with your breath, and just in that space of stillness and silence, just start to notice how the body's feeling. I think it's always really important when you take a seat or you sit down with the intention to practice, whether that be a physical asana practice or a meditation in seat, that you just honor and acknowledge how you're feeling physically, noticing how the breath feels, noticing how the mind is showing up for you in any given moment. Emotionally, energetically, and just holding space for whatever's there. And then start to find some fullness in the breath. You want to create a sense of revitalization, expansion, this building of prana or energy into the body. The feeling when you step out onto your back porch or deck and you take a big breath in because the sun is shining and it's warm and the birds are singing. And give yourself some of those big, beautiful breaths. And notice what it feels like to have the intention of bringing in and gifting yourself these big, full breaths. Then I want you to allow the mind to start to seek and call upon anything that you desire. It might be to see your family. It might be something in relation to your health. It may be something to do with your work. anything that you have a yearning for, a desire to create and bring into your life. Just allow those thoughts and ideas to come and float into your awareness. There might be lots of things, there might be just one thing. Just allowing the mind to expand out into dialogue, into thoughts, into considerations of what might be possible. And then breathe life into those ideas, into those desires. And allow yourself to imagine what it might feel like if you already had that thing or had achieved whatever you desired. You'd called it in, it was a part of your life. Imagine what it might feel like to first receive it, and then for it to be a part of your everyday. Creating a tangible, somatic experience in the body. Noticing perhaps the uplifting, joy, excitement, appreciation, gratitude that might come. Maybe it's relief. And then breathing life into those sensations, taking a full breath in. And letting all the breath go. And then just bringing your awareness back to your breath. Be here in your body in present moment awareness. We're going to move into a single leg stretch. We're going to stay sitting in a seat, but you might want to turn sideways along your mat like I am so that you have the length of the mat to support you here. You are welcome to keep your bottom elevated on a bolster or a block if that feels comfortable for you, to give you some space for your left knee to fall down to the floor. We're going to take the right leg straight out to the side. If it doesn't feel comfortable for you to stay with the hips elevated, you can bring your hips off the block or bolster and simply bring both sit bones to the ground. If you're really tight in your hips and that left knee is really elevated off the floor, I would grab something to provide some support, perhaps another cushion or a block or bolster, whatever you have there. I'm nursing a little bit of a knee issue at the moment, so it feels nice for me not to have to take the knee all the way down to the ground. So right leg out to the side. We're working here in just a really gentle opening through the whole line of the inner thigh. So if in sitting here with both sit bones grounded, you already have a stretch on the inner thigh, I would invite you just to rest your hands down in your lap, close down your eyes and stay here. If you're wanting to take a little bit more depth through the range of motion through that right hip and inner thigh, and also start to open up through the left side body as well, you can either take your hand to your knee or to your shin. You might want to use another block and have your elbow or forearm rest on a block. If you have a bolster or cushion, it can be really nice to place that on your leg and you can simply lay into it. And then you can rest here, or you can take your left arm up and overhead. Wherever you land, in whatever expression of this pose feels best for you, you simply close down the eyes. And I want you to really focus on the exhale. So you'll allow the breath to naturally come in. And then with a gentle intention of really allowing the exhale to slowly release. In traditional Chinese medicine, there are these energetic pathways that are associated with all of our vital organs. And each organ obviously plays a physiological role in the body, but they are also, according to the philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine, are deeply associated with particular emotions. There are 7 main emotions that, according to this philosophy, each organ holds, and there are paired organs and paired energetic lines. And the spleen, which we're working in today through the front body and the inner thigh and the hips, is associated with the emotion of worry. Quite a befitting practice to move through during these times. There's a lot of fear and a lot of concern. There's also a lot of other emotions that are tied in there as well. So we're really using the exhale in our practice today as a way to soften and release and surrender and let go, as a way to help neutralize and calm and balance the nervous system. And having the intention of using the breath to release and let go and surrender to anything that we don't need to hold on to anymore. You might find in the poses that as you stay and the fascia and the muscles soften, that you can find a little bit more depth. And you might be able to range a little bit closer towards that right leg, maybe not. Whatever is available to you is enough. Just continuing to keep the mind focused on that breath out as a way to soften, to relieve tension, to let go physically, energetically, emotionally, mentally. Just giving yourself 3 more breaths here. And then you'll slowly rise up. Just give yourself a moment in an upright position if you were leaning over towards the right leg. And then we're going to draw the soles of the feet together. And take your heels quite far away from your groin so that you create a big diamond shape in the legs. Again, if you're super tight in the hips, and this is not comfortable, like I'm pretty open in the hips and my knees comfortably rest here. There's no sort of force or rigidity, even though they don't quite hit the floor. But it can be nice to place some support underneath the back of the knees. So I'm placing that right over the edge of the lateral space of the knee, kind of meets the thigh and the shin at the same time. Cushions, pillows are a great option as well. Find length in the spine, so there's elevation through the heart space. Take a hold of either below your knees to your shins or maybe down towards your ankles. And as you breathe out, we're going to bend the elbows. So the elbows will drop down towards the inner thighs. So rather than collapsing through the heart and curling through the front body, we're going to try and keep the front body really long and bring it forward so that we're hinging more from the hips. We're going to drop the chin towards the chest. This is a really beautiful, energetic invitation to calm the mind. So dropping the chin towards the chest. You'll feel the softness in the belly here. So really let the lower abdomen go. Let it fall between the upper thighs. And when you do that, you'll notice the back softens a little bit as well. The hips soften a little bit more too. So creating as much space around the pelvic bowl as possible so that you can really hinge forward with as much integrity in the length of the spine as possible. And then breathing in deeply, the belly expands, a fullness in the belly. And then a long, slow breath out, exhale. This is less about trying to put your head on your feet and more about creating or closing off the gap between the upper thighs and the lower abdomen. So really keeping the spine as long as you can, pulling the heart through the shoulders and then hinging from the hips. You are naturally predisposed to incessant thinking and repetitive thought patterns and feeling unsure and uncertain and concerned and worried. These breath practices of taking forward folds, dropping your chin in, breathing into the depth of the belly and really slowing down and lengthening the exhale over time becomes a really valuable practice to help calm and stabilize the mind. And of course, the mind will constantly think. It will constantly wander. It will constantly draw back on the stories and the narrative and the dialogue to keep you in that loop of thinking. So it's not a matter of completely stopping thought altogether, but simply redirecting and building your concentration muscle in the mind so that you can keep bringing yourself back and giving yourself some reprieve, some present moment awareness, some softness, some space. Every time you notice the mind has wandered and you bring it back, doing yourself great service. Seeing if you can maintain that level of concentration for just 3 more breaths. Then you'll slowly rise up. Straighten your legs out in front of you. Stick your hands behind you and just stretch out your legs and slowly sweep your hips side to side. We're going to come into that single leg stretch onto the left. So before we do that, just nice to open up through the hips for a moment. And then when you feel ready, if you had turned to face the front of your mat, just come back sideways again. You're going to take the right leg in and the left leg out straight to the side. Again, you can use support. I'm not feeling like I need a block underneath this right knee. It's feeling really comfortable to be grounded. If you're lopsided and one butt cheek is not connected to the floor, I would suggest elevating, taking your hips up onto a block or a cushion or bolster. And then again, if you have a stretch here, ultimately in your yin practice, you're really wanting to stay in that place of just meeting your body in the first point of sensation. So for me right now, I actually have a very subtle stretch already in the inner thigh or in the inner groin, right up into the attachment into my pelvis and my pubic bone. So it's enough for me just to stay here right now. What will happen over time is that sensation will settle because the brain will realize that this is the neutral position now. Even though it's on stretch, it will say, okay, we're in a neutral position. This is the new space of rest, which is happening for me now. I can feel it shifting. So that when that softness or that sensation softens, then I can start to find a bit more depth. I'm going to take my forearm to a block here and my right arm up and over and cup the back of my head. It's unlikely I'll stay here for the whole duration because I have a little bit of a shoulder thing going on at the moment. So always meeting your body wherever you're at. If you have a pain syndrome, an injury, perhaps just some tightness in the body, just being super soft, really compassionate to yourself, meeting your body wherever it's at. So closing the eyes down, take a deep breath in. Let all the breath go. Resting your mind's awareness in the fluidity of the breath. Long, slow, controlled exhales. In these lateral stretches, it can get a little bit tiresome on the neck. If you're holding your head and hanging and suspending your head in the air, it might be nice for you just to drop your head into the support of a hand. And we'll just be here for one more minute. So just noticing if the body creates a little bit of space as you rest in stillness in the shape. Perhaps the sensation starts to lessen as the body realizes that holding in that first point of sensation becomes the point of rest, and then you can find maybe a little bit more depth, stretching into it a little bit further. And you'll slowly rise up. If you were stretched over that left leg, just give yourself a moment. Torso elevated, shoulders stacked over hips. And then come and lay flat on your back. You're welcome to bring a bolster under your knees if you need to. calming and resting on your back. If you need to, place your feet on the floor and move your tailbone away just to give your spine as much length as possible. We're going to come into a half happy baby pose as a way to really drive deep into the flexion of the hips. So we're going to pull the right knee into the chest, keeping the left leg out straight. It might also be nice to have the bolster or a cushion underneath your left knee, just as a way to soften that hip and that leg. And then if you can extend your foot up towards the ceiling and grab a hold of the edge of your right foot with your right hand. So taking the right side of the foot, not the inner side, taking the right outer edge, and then dropping the knee to the outside of your right shoulder. If that feels impossible or inaccessible, you can release the foot and just hold on to the knee, or take the hand behind the knee and then you can clasp your hand as a way to anchor and hold yourself in that space with a little bit more ease. I quite like doing this half happy baby variation with the bolster underneath the resting leg. It just helps to cement the pelvis and the hips, I find, in a more neutral position, because that left hip does want to roll up off the floor. I find with that gentle bend in the left knee, it helps to anchor the left hip down. We're just really squeezing into, compressing the front of the hip here, while we're also opening up through the inner thigh and also the hamstrings, big stretch into the hamstrings here. And then we'll come out of this and open up through the front of that right hip before we repeat that whole sequence on the left leg. Breathing deeply, using the breath as a way to surrender any repetitive thoughts, feelings, any narrative dialogue that's on replay. Invite those words and that narrative to disappear through the breath. Create space. Space in the mind, space in the heart, space in the body. Giving yourself one final breath here. Draw the knee back in towards the center, hugging the knee into the chest. Just stretch out through the back of the leg for a moment. And then extend the leg to meet the left leg, so both legs flat down on the floor or resting on the bolster. And just take a moment to notice the subtle pranic differences, the energetic differences in the right compared to the left leg. And cultivating a level of pranic sensitivity so you can really understand and recognize the influence of the poses on the body physically and energetically. And then we're going to come up onto our hands and knees. We're going to keep the right leg back. So hopefully you had the right leg up in the happy baby pose, and that knee is going to stay on the floor. We're going to bring the left leg forward. So we're going to come into a nice big hip opener here after being in that deep compression of the hip in the happy baby. If you can't reach the floor here, it would be great to have blocks underneath your hands. I'm taking my left foot to the edge of my left side of my mat so that both of my hands can be more aligned and underneath the shoulders. Untuck the toe on the back foot if that feels comfortable. Otherwise, you can keep the toes flexed and grounded on the floor. And then you're really wanting to drive the right hip forward and try and pull your chest through the shoulders to keep the head, neck, shoulders upright and an openness through the whole front body. Almost like you're trying to open from the right knee all the way up through the right hip, all the way up to the collarbone. So you're creating this little banana shape through the whole front line of the body. And we're giving, particularly through the hip, front of the hip and the torso here, really big stretch through this energetic pathway through the spleen meridian. It's definitely a more energizing pose where we've been focusing on really driving the length of the exhale as a way to calm the mind and the emotional body. These gentle heart openers are really uplifting and re-energizing. But you can keep the mind really stable and clear and calm by keeping an equal breath pattern, feeling and enjoying the expansion through the chest as you breathe in, but still inviting a long, deep breath out. Just giving yourself 5 more breaths here. And to come out of that deep lunge, slowly send your hips back. Bring your left knee down to the floor. And if you can, just sit back on your heels, just allowing a really gentle, neutral flexion through the hip here, so we're not in a really deep fold. Just giving a moment for the hip to come back into a flex position. And then we'll come and lay flat on our back. And if you like to having the bolster underneath your knees, you can bring that underneath. Give yourself a big breath in. And breath out. Keeping that right leg down on the floor this time. It's done all the hard work. We're going to bring the left knee into the chest to begin with. Just clasping your fingers around your shin and hugging the thigh in towards the belly. Deep compression in through the front of the left hip. And then extending the leg up. It's so your foot is stamping on the ceiling, grabbing a hold of the outer edge of the left foot, and then letting the knee fall to the outside of the shoulder. So you can see my shin is upright, my knee is anchored down towards the edge of my left shoulder. My left elbow is sort of kissing the inside of my left calf. And if that's feeling too strong or it's not accessible, you can let go of the foot, just hug the knee out towards the left armpit, or take your left arm underneath the left knee crease. If you're working towards happy baby and it's really close, it can be great to have a strap. If you don't have a formal yoga strap, a belt or a dressing gown cord, or even just a long sleeve t-shirt can be great. You can wrap it around your foot and hang on to the strap as a way to inching closer into being able to grab hold of your foot. But of course, it's not the end goal that we're striving towards, but the journey and the process. Just appreciating and loving and having compassion and gratitude for your body, no matter what it's doing. Deep breaths into the belly. Three more breaths here. And draw the left knee back into the chest in a central line. Little squeeze, final compression through the front of that hip. And then extend the leg all the way back down onto the floor. Let the pelvis neutralize. Sacrum equally compressed to the earth. And then we'll roll over to the side. Take a moment if you need to before you come up. And we'll come all the way over onto our hands and knees. Keeping the left knee on the floor. Bringing the right foot forward. Into your big juicy lunge. I'm taking my right foot to the edge of my right mat. Just give some space for that left hip to really plunge forward. My hands are underneath my shoulders, pulling the heart space through so that there is elevation and length through the torso, really opening up now from that left knee all the way through the front of the thigh, really opening up through the right to that central point in the front of the hip flexor, and then this beautiful opening through the heart space in this really energizing, uplifting way. But finding as much softness and ease in the pose as possible. So we're appreciating and enjoying the big, beautiful breaths in. And keeping the self anchored and grounded, stable and calm through a long, controlled exhale. Just 5 more breaths here. And to come out, slowly send your hips back, closing off the front of that left hip for a moment. Step the right knee back. Come and sit down over your heels if you can. Just give yourself a couple of centering breaths, just resting the hips gently flexed in a seated position. Then we're going to come and lay on our back. Just opening up, allowing your whole body to rest on the floor. And give yourself 5 big breaths here. And then we're just going to come into a supported bridge pose. So you're going to need either a block or a bolster here. Placing your feet flat on the floor, lift your hips up, slide your support underneath your bottom. I prefer to use the bolster here because it's soft. It's also a little bit deeper, so it gives me a little bit more surface area support. So you really want to make sure the whole bottom is supported and you don't have the bolster up too high so that you curl and open through the lower back. You want to keep your tailbone shooting down towards your heels and the whole sacrum supported. So the top of my pelvis is supported by the bolster. And then you're extending your legs out. So we've just done a really big juicy stretch into the front of the hips through the lunge. But now we're just taking it into a really soft stretch. And if you have the capacity to take your arms up overhead, it might feel nice to do that, to give yourself a nice stretch through the torso and the side body. We won't be here for too long. If it feels super uncomfortable or there's anything going on, particularly in your lower back, you might want to just simply place your feet on the floor, have your feet to the edges of your mat, and knock your knees in slowly towards the center. Here we're also opening up through the lower aspect of this meridian, through the lower abdomen, into the lower rib cage, and then we'll come into a beautiful heart opener to finish the practice as a way to really open up through the front body, through the spleen meridian, through this energetic pathway running up through the front of the belly, across the chest. Just one final breath here. And bending your knees, take your feet onto the floor. You're going to press your hips up off the bolster. Come and lay flat on your back. Keep your feet on the floor. This is a way to really anchor the pelvis down onto the earth. And give yourself a few breaths here. And then rolling over to your side, we're going to come up just for a moment and we'll come into a heart opener. So you have the option of taking your bolster against your sacrum if you have a bolster. You could come into a really beautiful heart opener, taking the bolster across the top of your mat and having the shoulders rest over the top of the bolster. If you don't have a bolster but you have blocks or another cushion, you can take your block to the center of your back and laying down over it, head either coming down to the floor or to another block underneath the head. Whichever option you're taking, I'm going to stay here resting on the blocks. Taking your arms out to side body, palms facing the sky as a way to open up through the front of the chest and give you this beautiful opening through the heart space. And again, just like in the lunge, really leaning into that space of revitalization and this uplifting experience of really boosting your energy body, this big opening heart as you breathe in fully. Using the exhale as a way to stay anchored in present moment awareness, to stay calm and stable, to be fully present. Just noticing if you've used the entire practice as a way to process and problem solve and think and plan about your days. Just really gift yourself these final minutes to be fully present. Some space in the mind, concentrating on the breath, to be here now, to surrender all thought, to let go of anything you're holding, anything you're worrying about, to create space for newness to come. Just taking your final 2 breaths here. And to come out, simply bend one knee, place one foot on the floor. Roll yourself over to the opposite direction. Move your supports out of the way. Return to being flat on your back. You may like to take a bolster underneath your knees as you allow your whole spine to integrate back into a neutral position, shoulders, hips, equal, symmetrical. And give yourself a big breath in. And a big breath out. Taking your final resting pose, really gifting yourself these final few minutes, being mindful not to rush off into your day or into your mind to plan about what needs to happen for the rest of your day. To just keep being here. Present moment awareness in the body, in the breath. Gift yourself a big full breath in and out. Just noticing any subtle sensations in the body. Notice any dialogue in the mind. Allow your awareness to expand out to sounds within your home and beyond into the world outside. And then make your way over to your favorite side. Curl yourself up into a little ball. Give yourself a nice big breath in. And out. And slowly rise up into a seat. Bring with you the intention to be open to the possibilities, to be open to transformation and change, to be open to receive, to be willing to surrender all that doesn't serve you. Carrying with you the qualities of spring. Bringing your hands to your heart, Anjali Mudra, palm to palm, allowing your heart to press up in towards your thumb tips. Give yourself a beautiful breath in, full and expansive. A beautiful breath out. Bowing your head to your heart and honoring yourself for your commitment to your practice. Namaste.